The Doctor's Corner is sponsored by DigiConnect. We bring years of experience providing government agencies with customized solutions, all designed to improve customer service and increase participation. We offer high-speed broadcast messaging, streaming educational videos, and multilingual translation services. For more information, contact us at 877-235-7714.
Hello, podcast listeners. I am Dr. K and a proud United States Navy veteran, and welcome. Welcome to the Doctor's Corner, where we focus on this nation's veterans and improving literacy across America. Routinely on the Doctor's Corner, we provide 30-minute comprehensive literature reviews, offering our subjective evaluation and star rating of whether a compilation is a 5-star compelling read, a 3-star average read, or a 1-star, a less than compelling read, with hopes of helping you to determine what's your next compelling read. Well, today we have guests, both of which are U.S. Army veterans. I say who?
Who?
First, we have Pamala Charles, author of today's featured compilation titled Let's Stay Together. Mrs. Charles' 20-year commitment in the community has been assisting soldier veteran couples in various capacities. She currently facilitates intensive, accelerated learning relationship workshops and online relationship programs across the U.S. She speaks at various events as an Inspire transformation coach and is working on her second book called Queen Warrior. Alongside Mrs. Charles is Mr. Gadius Charles, retired U.S. Army veteran. During his dedicated military service, he earned recognition as one of the first soldiers at Fort Hood to receive a battlefield promotion since the Vietnam War. Mr. Charles has his own transportation business, ensuring the safe transport of individuals and families throughout Austin and surrounding cities. He also assists in managing and guiding his wife's speaking and coaching business. Mr. and Mrs. Charles have been married for more than 21 years. Mrs. Charles will be the first to tell you that military relationships are not always easy. Actually, any relationship or marriage can be difficult. And so, Mrs. Charles says, listen up.
There's a new way to thrive together.
Mr. and Mrs. Charles, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Let's get started. So, Mr. and Mrs. Charles, please tell the Doctor's Corner's listeners a little bit about yourself.
You go ahead.
Well, I was born and raised in St. Martinville, Louisiana. I joined the Army in 1994. I served 20 years in the military. My first 6.5 years was field artillery, and I changed to a chemical specialist, and I did logistics for 5 years. I operated a supply room in the military. I moved 10 times in those 20 years to numerous different duty stations, and I had 2 deployments to Iraq.
Wow. Mrs. Charles?
Well, for me, I grew up a country girl, like literally on a farm, getting eggs out of the coop was my job every day. But what's crazy about that is even when you're small, you always know you want more. And so my parents, between the two of them, there were 9 of us. So I joined the Army in 1997 because I knew I wanted college and I knew they couldn't afford to send me. So the military at 2 a.m., I heard Reveille play, be all you can be. So with that next week, I was there at the recruiter station putting my hand up. But my dad was already Air Force. I just told him I wanted to do something harder than him. I was going to go and be a real soldier. Yeah, you'll see what a grunt feels like in a little bit. Just wait. What I will say is my stint in the military was wonderful, and I appreciate the education I got. And as far as when you get hurt, like I used to tell all my veterans all the time, and I still do, never let your disabilities define you, because they're not who we are, And so success comes through, adversity. And so that's what I would say. And meeting this gentleman was definitely not what I was looking for. Like, that wasn't what I meant to do when I came in. He was definitely a surprise.
Sure. Speaking of, in your book, Mrs. Charles, Let's Stay Together, you colorfully describe how you two met in the Army, but it wasn't love at first sight. So, Mr. Charles, can you share your experience since Mrs. Charles outlined hers in the book?
Well, I had a dream telling me the person I was looking for would be at Fort Hood. And when I arrived at Hood, it was four of us that stood to the side and became close friends while in processing the post.
Wow.
She had looked totally different in her civilian clothes. I looked at her every day during that 4-day weekend and told myself she was the one for me.
That's so sweet.
She helped me fill out a ticket that I received driving to Fort Hood, and I told her I could use a person like you in my life. I asked her to go to the movies, just the two of us. I made every attempt to be with her after we left the in-processing center.
Mhm.
The four of us agreed to go to Florida and stop in Louisiana so she can pick up her vehicle.
Mhm.
Only I was able to go because the others couldn't get leave approved.
Mhm.
We ended up not making it to Louisiana due to her vehicle being broken when we arrived there. Plus, there were other issues of her not being able to visit our oldest daughter during the 2-week stay. We had deep conversations about what we wanted to accomplish in our life, and she really wanted Sherelle with her. Once we arrived back at Fort Hood, we agreed to move into an apartment and get married. We only knew each other 51 days and got married. We've been married for 21 years.
He's the only one that knew that number. When we got married, I think that night we arrived, he was the one who said, "You do realize we're married, but we've only known each other 51 days." I was like, "You were counting?" It was funny.
I was in South Korea. It was our anniversary when I went to South Korea in 2002. And I was, just there. I was like, I called her. I said, we only knew each other 51 days and got married.
Wow. What a return on your investment right there.
Yes, that's an ROI. That is a wonderful ROI.
Wow. Mrs. Charles, can you share with the Doctor's Corner's listeners what compelled you to write such a telling memoir?
Oh, wow. After, during our relationship, I was in school once I got through my medical board, in which it was tough because I was fighting to stay in. And that's one thing most of us, if any of us on this call are veterans, and so does know what that's like. And so once I got finished with school, I started coming in contact with more and more veterans and soldiers that were having a lot of trouble in their relationships. And I knew what it felt like because we had been in those dark trenches, And I kept saying all the time to our middle child, we call him Roadrunner because he runs everywhere. He's never still. But little Gadius is 17 now. And he would say when he was 13, "Mommy, stop talking about writing your book. You have all these things that you've done and all these soldiers and veterans you've helped. You say we can do anything in the world if we put our mind to it. So put your mind to it and just get it done." And literally, he just walked away. You know how they say out of mouth the babes,
Mm-hmm.
And he just walked off. And that same day that he said it, I told my husband, "When you get home from the base, get the boys. I just need 2 hours every night to write." And so for 30 days, I wrote and compiled over 15 years all of the research I had. And I was like, okay, I need to make this as raw and real as possible so soldiers and veterans understand. I'm never saying it's easy. You have to put your boots and your gloves on and get ready to work if you're going to fight back to where you were. As a matter of fact, not even where your relationship was, but better than that. Because you should get wiser with time. And when you don't, you just haven't been given the proper tools. And so the book was a necessity because we're 21 years later saying, hey, you can come out of those trenches and it can be better, but it's only up to you. No one else gets to tell you that. Not your family, not your relatives, not your friends. It's your relationship. And your kids grow up and move on. What do you want to have when they're gone? When they're no longer living in the house in the empty nest. Well, I want to still, shiver when I think of him or his kisses. And so the book was not complicated. It was just a long time coming, is what I will say. I know it was needed.
Wow. That is so adorable. I mean, that's what this world need, and we have it here in the military. So when you talk about raw and real, Mr. Charles, Let's Stay Together details times when you were supportive in your marriage and sometimes when you were not so supportive. Can you recollect and share instances of each time, and what were you thinking and feeling, and did it have anything to do with the military?
Well, my wife feel I was not supportive, but I think the biggest one was during the first pregnancy. I stayed at work a lot and avoid dealing with losing my son. And my wife, if something went wrong during that pregnancy, I agreed that I was scared and I pushed away from going to most of the appointments to stay detached from the situation. I just feel like I don't know how I felt. I just felt like I was going to lose him, and
Oh,
I was scared. This is my first time ever seeing a kid being brought into the world.
sure.
But the one that actually held it all together was our oldest. Sherelle. She the one. Like when the day came, Dad, here's the bag. Here's here's that. And go. So,
Drop me off at best man's house. She's
yeah,
our rock of Gibraltar.
she was the one that put it all together. Our strong 26-year-old, now to be.
Yeah, she's a powerhouse. I mean, but we raised her that way as two Army parents. We were really tough.
That was the biggest one of the non-supporter that I constantly hear. Every so often from my wife, and I try to make it up when we had our little 8-year-old. So
Mhm.
You didn't miss any of those. You were there even when I wanted you to leave the room. So it was you were good. You were good.
fear was
Kudos.
over with now for that situation.
Yeah.
And I'm
Wow.
sure there's many more. I just can't remember them.
Sure.
I try to blank some of the stuff out.
Sure. Sure. Well, I can definitely relate. And thank you. Thank you for being so raw and real. That's one thing that Let's Stay Together did bring to the forefront. Military members are real people. They have real issues. They have happiness, joy, sadness, hurt. So you did an excellent job at capturing that, Mrs. Charles. Speaking of the Rock of Gibraltar, I read that name so many times. I'm like,
Yeah.
what is she talking about? And then when you attach the name to your first baby girl for both of you, did you find that raising one child, let alone three in the military, was difficult?
Oh wow. Because my husband was as dedicated. I mean, you know how the military works. He deployed a lot, and even with them not being the big ones like Iraq all the time, and then Korea, they always had mini deployments where they were gone somewhere like Pinyon Canyon or California at NTC. They just always had these multiple deployments. So for us, it was literally being a single parent. That's what people don't understand a lot of times in the military. That even though there are two parents on paper, that other person is gone, not by choice. At any time, my husband would have wanted to be at home, but he couldn't because he put his hand up. And when you affirm or swear in, your job and your diligence is to the government entity that you assigned yourself to. And so it would be us and the kids against the world. And it was hard for me because a lot of times they missed him so much, they looked past me. It would be like our big girl was playing basketball and she would be looking at me, but then looking behind me because she knew her dad always sat behind her games. On one incident, it was like her birthday, and he was getting ready to leave on a plane for Iraq. And he said a phrase to her before he got on the plane. You go out there and you win this for me tonight. And I'm talking about at a level where they know you've arrived. And then he got on the plane. That night, Rock of Gibraltar scored 24 points in a local game this is the one that was in the paper. Like we actually have the ad from the paper. They show Rising Star and it shows 24 points, but she's only like in the 7th grade. And she's
Wow.
doing things and still in the ball like pros do. And they're looking at her like this is a kid playing like she's a dude out here, not saying anything about how girls play, because that's awesome basketball females. But she played that game with her whole heart because her dad had already told her. And with our younger son, he would go to school and he would just sit and tap and look out the window. And the teacher started asking questions, what's going on at home? Or his dad just deployed again. And so at Fort Hood and Killeen at Peebles, they had a program for military kids because they needed after school to help them just get their mind off of missing their parents. So his school drew a picture. They changed all the colors and then they mailed it to all these different locations. And then his dad got it in Iraq and he took it to all the places they were going to with his different colleagues. And then had them all say something and took photos with it and then sent it back. So it let the kids know, hey, again, a real parent, a real soldier involved even with his kids' stuff from far away. And it made our son feel so good to get that little man, that little paper, Mercedes man, back from Iraq. Because when they're gone, they're gone. And so you're talking. So for us, we constantly would say communication. He Skyped, well, actually, it wasn't Skype then. What was it? MySpace that you would get on in the morning? He would stand in line for like an hour just to come on for a few minutes. And so what I will say is you got to talk you got to put things in place that make it make sense to the kids. Because when they're small, they don't understand why someone has to go. And I was in school full time. I would fix their snacks, have them on the counters, put the dinner already on the stove, and all she needed to do was warm it up. We had rules. You don't open the door. You don't take any phone calls. You don't look out the windows. And they had to call and check in with me during night class on the phone. We even had to get Rocket DeRoto a hardship driver's license. I don't know if you've heard of those before, but they're for kids whose parents do deploy, or a parent is away on business, and that kid needs to be able to drive if an emergency happens.
Sure.
So there are a lot of things you got to put in place as a family. And then you get extended family that don't even have blood running through their veins, but they're more powerful and closer to my children now than actual relatives in Florida. Because we've never been back, not to live. He's never been back to Louisiana, and I've never lived back in Florida. Because the military keeps you far away from your actual family. So you build those relationships to get through it. They say it takes a village to raise, child. Well, in the Army, it takes much more larger than just a village. It's community coming from all over the world coming together. And it's not easy because your trust is, it takes 3 years before you actually are comfortable, letting your kid go to the other person's house. And then you're asking questions and calling and checking in. So is it difficult? Yes. Can it be done? Yes. Can you thrive? Absolutely. But you're going to have so many times that you get confused on what your role is, and you have to work that out. Because I wore a pants skirt and didn't even know how to take it off when he would come home because we had a system that worked. And so we would get, he's like, I don't even feel like I belong here, when he would come back from deployments.
Yeah.
You have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'm just, trying to raise kids in the military and having a happy wife is a challenge.
Yeah.
As you can see, my wife did most of that while trying to get her master's. I had a lot of early mornings and late nights, especially before the deployments and after deployments, and before the field problems and after the field problems or field exercise, as people may know it. A lot. It was 24-hour shift of being on staff duty and CQ and just getting ready. At the same time, whenever I could do family outings with my kids, I made sure it was something they would never forget, and I enjoy seeing them laugh.
Wow.
He does it birthdays big.
Wow. The power of a united family is immeasurable. And just based off the book, and I'm just listening to the interview, you guys nailed it. And I'm honored. I'm actually honored to facilitate this interview. In saying that, Mr. Charles, I thoroughly enjoyed the outline of your experience with the Rock's extended family. Your response of, "Don't you see my daughter in the back seat?" Now, see, I put my own tone on that.
Yes.
I put my own tone on that. I thought it was awesome. "Don't you see my daughter in the back seat?" And this is my daughter. Carried a ton of weight and completely radiated absolute commitment and masculinity. In hindsight, is there anything that you would have added or done differently if placed in that same situation today?
No, family or not. When I stepped into that role, and my wife and I had a talk about what happened to my daughter's biological father, I told my wife she would not be treated like a stepchild, and I would not treat her differently if we had kids together. Me stepping up to my uncle was the right thing to do, and that was the bottom line, that my daughter, not stepdaughter, was sitting in the back seat, and that's just how I had to be. That's my daughter. Even when I talk to people, I explain to them, I have 3 kids. I never really say stepdaughter. I mean, some of them get it after I say, I've been married for 21 years, only knew my wife for 51 days. But
They do the math.
Then they do the math and say, okay, that's but to me, that's my daughter. I raised her. It's when her biological mother calls, I don't think she calls my wife. She calls me.
It's true.
To find out what's going on.
Where's my son?
She's like, where's my son? Because I know I'm gonna get the nitty gritty from what's actually going on. I know you're gonna tell me. When we go down there, we make sure. I make sure that we stop over there at her house to go see her. Even when Sherelle is not with us, we still go down there. It's just crazy at times, but they all look at me as as the son. Even when we went to Florida, and I didn't really know the whole deal. I didn't know when I left my car at Fort Hood that was Sherelle's actual uncle, her dad's brother, real brother, house that we were actually at the whole time prior to us leaving to go to Florida in that short time that we met. But he kept on saying,
he the one.
He the one. And
he would not let other people
any
call
other
me.
guys called, he's like, she's already taken. And, that's what his wife told me. He's like, she already taken, So I guess I was the one.
Wow. That is so chilling. And I say it's chilling because Mr. Charles, nowadays, I didn't look up the stats on it, but I can tell you there is a high number of single families, whereas it's just mom and the children. So you spent 20 years in the United States Army and you stuck by your family. I can do nothing but hand salute you. I'm happy for you, Mrs. Charles. I mean, because
I'm happy for me too, sweetie.
Yeah.
Every day, all day. We don't call around here for nothing.
Because that part of the book, I stopped. I had some chills because it was real. That's real talk right there. So, Mr. Charles, just hats off to you on that one. What do you think was the overall contributing factor of you two staying together, despite the deployments, the military obligation, and life's obstacles detailed in your book, Let's Stay Together?
We actually had a healthiest relationship SOP, and we began to actually want to be better than what we were yesterday. And see, people keep thinking that SOPs are only for offices, but when I wrote it in the book, it was to make it really simple for families. If something's bad, sit down and actually talk about what you want changed. And then you outline what those changes look like. Not what you think they should be for the other person, what you want them to be for you. Because then when you exchange that list, those are the changes the other person will make. Because you wrote them, you know what makes you feel good. Like for us, we have an agreement that I fix my husband's plate. It doesn't matter where we are, whether we're in Louisiana, whether we're in Florida, a different state. Here at home, I fix his plate. That is what he likes. Well, I like my door open. Chivalry's not dead. So you as a woman, why can't you tell the person you say you love the most what you really want? What are you afraid of? At no time should that person that you love the most be offended by what you say to them in love, in kindness. I'm not saying go start yelling at someone to get your point across, because that doesn't get any point across. But in the healthiest relationship SOPs, you write down what you truly want, and then you compromise on those things, and then you put them in place because these are the goals. And then if, like, even with the kids, our daughter had her own, and it would tell her, okay, this is when you can wear makeup. This is when you can get a cell phone. This is when you can begin to date. The boys have one too. And it's all related to whether it's their academics or dating or what their curfews are. And if they have any, we would say, punishable, crimes, does the punishment fit the crime? We would list those too. And the kids would tell us whether they thought the crime was too harsh. Or if they wanted to come amend the SOP, they would say, hey, can we have a meeting to make a change here? And then we discuss it. And see, and that's where also in the book, the blended, family, a true blended family doesn't have lines defined. Like you heard my husband say, no, she's never been my stepdaughter. Exactly. Mm-hmm. See, because if you define step, then you already drew a line in the sand. And how do you cross that? Because you already made that child different. I mean, from the time we got married, we changed her name. And we made sure she was always going to be exactly the same, no matter whether we ever had children together. That was the point him and I made. So what I will say, in the military, regardless of everything else that happened, us being devoted to making sure we raise them that way, unified, teaching them the healthiest relationship SOP and having them enforce it, and also telling them all the time they've been growing up, look, you can be upset with each other, but you can never tell each other you hate each other. And you must always love each other. And then teaching that privacy mark. If she said, I need me time, her little brother would leave the room and go back to his room. Now, I'm going to tell you, Rocket Gibraltar did have to have a hard wish not when she came home from college. And he turned around when she went to his room thinking she could just walk in because he was going to be excited to see her. And he said, excuse me, I need my me time. If you would have been there, you would have heard her run downstairs crying. Oh my God, he doesn't want to spend time with me. But in all fairness, he was just, exuding that same authority that she had when she was his age. And it was beautiful to see it come full circle for her, because then she calmed down and was like, that's right. He's implementing the rule we've always had. And so I would say those top three things: the healthiest relationship SOP, communicating your wants and needs, and actually putting pen to paper and teaching the kids to love each other without that other stuff. Because how do you get past it if you don't? You don't have to always see eye to eye, but you must have something in place to get past it. And I'm not saying that you don't ever have moments where you just that mad, because we do. I mean, when I say we're real every day, all day. If I'm already in that place, I want everybody to not be talking to me right now. And my husband now is able to engage, some of those. There are times he run right into a storm now. I mean, what is that phrase you told the principal that one day about me?
Oh, you the hurricane and tornado when it comes to the situation. But I'm the devil. You ain't gonna never see me coming.
Okay. Not the reference to the devil part. I think he was going for a fact that you always know when I'm upset. And he's very quiet and meticulous, so you never hear him coming. It's just already happened to you. That's what he meant. Yeah. But it's powerful in nature.
Wow. That's real talk. So, Mr. Charles, even with my military experience, I debated rejoining the United States Navy as many as 8 years later. You were discharged and decided to rejoin almost immediately. How long did you stay out?
7 days.
Almost immediately.
Ink wasn't even drawing the paper.
Yeah, when I joined the military, I was trying to leave a place that I knew I did not want to be for the rest of my life. Most people in my town worked at the Fruit of the Loom mills and the sugarcane fields. After we married, I wanted them to see Colorado, so I re-enlisted for it. We had our middle child, and I received orders to South Korea. And I noticed I was spending too much time away from home, so I exited the service, I ETS, after 9.5 years of service from South Korea. When I went to the workforce for a job back in Colorado Springs, I met an older gentleman, and I asked him why was he looking for a job. And he replied to me by saying the company he retired from filed bankruptcy and his retirement stopped. I said to him, can a company do that? And the gentleman said, I'm the example. I went to the counter to talk to the rep at the desk. I told that lady that she don't have to worry about me. I'm going back into the military. I arrived home and told my wife that story and said, I'm going back into the military. And she told me she could see it on my face when I walked through the door.
It's true.
Wow.
There was 400 people at that unemployment office, and it was only
about 100 jobs.
Yep.
And I was like, yep, not for me.
Wow. I attended an event yesterday at City Hall, orchestrated and coordinated by Vetted Heroes. And there were a lot of individuals that were prior military. And one of the individuals, he worked at Microsoft. Can't remember his name, but he had spent 20 years in the Marines. And he highlighted something that you don't really have at the forefront of your mind, which is when military members get out, they see like dry tumbleweed, this just nothing. You don't know what to look forward to, because everything that you had that was structured and there and made available, it was decent. It was in order. You don't have that in the civilian sector. And so we lose a level of security. We lose a level of something, and you don't know where to go. You don't know what to reach for. So I just kind of like toughed it out, but by God's grace, I made it. But I too, like you, I was ready to go back in. So, Mr. and Mrs. Charles, can you share at least 3 takeaways that you will want TDC's listeners and readers of Let's Stay Together to value or hold at the forefront of their minds?
That it's never over till it's over. You can always come back. I mean, when you're at your darkest and lowest level, and you can't even see the light, just know, even if there's a glimpse that you remember, why you fell in love, you have something to fight for. But you both got to be fighting. You have to be fighting. And I'm never saying it happens overnight, because you didn't get in the trenches overnight. And so I would say that, like for us, when we taught a relationship awareness winners workshop at Fort Hood, well, we use Belton. Belton has Ballora. It's one of the water parks that they implement for the government there. And so we did our RAW boot camp there. And RAW just really means, it's an acronym, how we do in the military. It means relationship awareness winners. See, because you can't be a winner in your relationship until you're aware. So that was the whole purpose of acronyming it that way. And so at that boot camp, we literally had, couples show up, and they went through trainings that immersed them in, look, this is what was bad. but what can you make good out of that? What can you train and fix right now? And so when they went through the training it was like maybe we were there for about 3 or 4 hours, and then the meal was provided. The couples began to tell us, look, we love everything we're learning with you, but don't name it something bad. I said, what you can say is explain to people that what you're teaching, yes, it's raw, but it's about being able to thrive and revitalize something that you thought was long gone. And so I would say my takeaway is always know that there is a chance, as long as you're willing to go get it. You have to do it, no one else. And it can't be one of you, and when you get back to that, I mean, like when I look at my husband and I see that twinkle in his eye, when he strokes the center of my back that lead me through, I still get a chill. Well, how do you get back to that part? As I have a baby sister in Florida, she would tell me that part. Initially, I had no idea what that meant, but her point was it means it's that serious. When you can get back to that part, when you loved them, when you didn't have nothing, when we just had that two-bedroom apartment on Lake Road, it wasn't big, but it was home, and it was filled with nothing but love every day. And so, yes, can you do that? Yes. Relationship awareness winners can do that for you. The book itself, Let's Stay Together, can do that for you because it tells you real tools that work right now. I mean, I've helped more than 1,000 soldiers and veterans, but a lot of it I did for free because I didn't understand my own worth. And so what I can tell your listeners is value your worth first, because when you can get you right and remember why you love you, then you can teach someone else how to love you. And when you don't, you can't. We actually have that boot camp tagged linked to our book. When you go to our site at www.info.iki.com, it tells you about our company, Implemented Knowledge Institute. And the reason, it's implemented knowledge is because there are a lot of people who know a lot of things. And they say, well, knowledge is power. Well, I'm here to tell you I disagree. Knowledge is not power. Implemented knowledge is power. Because I've known plenty of things I should have done right before and still failed to do them. So, that's not why. That's why it must be implemented. So with that being said, when you go to that site, you see the book and it offers you the ebook for free if you just like to read it, digitally. But if you're tangible, like a lot of us are, and you want a hard copy, you will also be allowed to purchase the actual book. And it comes with a lot of bonuses, in which those bonuses are free to your guests here on Doctor's Corner. So when they go to that site, to www.info.iki.com, I made it smaller because Implemented Knowledge Institute is actually too long to say. When they get to that site, they will be able to get those freebies, with the drawbag and the T-shirts and the LED light up cups, just to remind them when they're sipping on something that, hey, you're reading these pages, but you're making change, with your gear on. That makes you just feel good about what you're trying to do, because transformation comes with work and you got to be consistent. So with that, when you click it, then it moves you to the actual program. And the program is a whole nother level of training because you got to be dedicated in that, because now you're doing one-on-one training with my husband and myself. That one's a bit more expensive, but it's not for everybody. It's for the folks who want change now and they want a walk through step by step with us holding their hand.
Sure.
And so that's just an option for them on there. They could always say, no, thank you. Like our little one says, our 8-year-old tells us that when he doesn't want something. I mean, he's autistic, but he knows that phrase, no, thank you. And he's very stern when he says it and he puts his hand out. So I tell people all the time, only go for what you know you really want to put the work in for. And if not, then you walk away. Because change only comes when you want it. I don't force anything on anyone. Just know that if you need our help, Implemented Knowledge Institute is here for you. And RAW is one of the best things I think we've ever done together. It really is, because it's exactly that. Everything about it is raw. I wouldn't say we play with anything that we do. We take it seriously, but we're goofballs at the same time. I'm a big kid. Like Marvel came out. I assure you I will be at the end game.
Mrs. Charles, we're going to wrap up our interview, but I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I'm hoping that you will visit us again on the Doctor's Corner. Before I go, can you and Mr. Charles share where you can find copies of Let's Stay Together?
Well, like I said, you can find the book in our programs at www.info.iki.com. As well as the book can be purchased on Amazon.
Okay, perfect. This will conclude the interview. So, my final thoughts of Let's Stay Together are as follows. Mrs. Charles prepared and shared an exemplary tell-all, which is up close and personal, giving readers a bird's eye view into the life, challenges, highs, and lows of military couples. The navigation of topics between the chapters were fascinating, as she opened up Let's Stay Together with the untimely death of her first love and ended Let's Stay Together with thriving together with her lifelong love, Gadius Charles. Each main character throughout the chapters were carefully depicted, and the story was easy to follow. As discussed during today's interview, Mr. and Mrs. Charles presented a harsh reality, but managed it with finesse and grace, God's given grace. As you and I both know, many marriages suffer after military deployments and household changes because of those deployments. Mrs. Charles eloquently laid it out for the world to see. Problems. But she also demonstrates you can overcome them. Mrs. Charles offers information on overcoming through spiritual pursuit, meditation, mediation, just to gain progress. But there will be pain, inevitable pain. I rate Let's Stay Together a 5-star compelling read. It is a necessary read for military couples, veterans, and non-veterans. Take that bird's eye view. Take a look and see what military couples experience. This concludes this episode of the Doctor's Corner, which was brought to you by DigiConnect.